In the fall of 1980, Suzanne Summers was playing Chrissy Snow on Three's Company, the #1 comedy in America.
There are only 3 networks, and I was on the #1 show on the #1 network out of 3.
No woman on network TV was pulling bigger numbers than she was. Then the producers running her own show decided to bury her. For 4 years, she had worked on the apartment set beside John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt in nearly every scene. Now her part was cut down to a phone call here and there, and even those were filmed on a separate stage, on a separate day, so that she never crossed paths with either of them again. All because she had asked to be paid what the show was paying John Ritter.
I felt I deserved it. I mean, I had the highest demographics of all women on television. And I was on the #1 show when there were only 3 networks.
When Summers first joined Three's Company in 1977, she was making about $3,500 a week. That was reasonable money for a new cast member on an unproven show. By 1980, the show had turned into the biggest comedy in America, and Summers' pay had climbed with it, up to $30,000 an episode. John Ritter, her co-star, was making many times that. Summers and Hamill put his number at around $150,000 an episode, and that figure is the one that has followed the story ever since, though people close to the production have argued for years that his real number was lower. Whatever the exact gap was, nobody has ever disputed that there was one. For the same show, the same schedule, the same demands on anyone's time. She and her husband, Alan Hamill, decided the moment had come to close the gap with Ritter. They asked for $150,000 an episode, matching him dollar for dollar, and something bigger on top of it, a share of the show's future profits.
So they sit down, and my husband says, as you know, Suzanne's been on the show for 6 years now, and she has the highest demographics of all women in television. She would like to be paid, which the men are averaging on television, which is $150,000 a week, and a piece of the back end.
According to the Television Academy's own history of the show, that ask came to roughly 10%. That back-end demand was standard practice for a star at her level once a show turned into a hit. A weekly paycheck disappears the day a show ends. A share of the show doesn't. It keeps paying out through reruns and syndication for years afterward. 2 years later, the man who controlled Three's Company's distribution rights would turn down offers in the $10 to $15 million range before finally selling the rights for $70 million. That's the kind of money a single percentage point actually meant. She'd later say she hoped to bring Ritter and DeWitt into the ask too, so all 3 of them could come out ahead together.
And I say to John and Joyce, at the end of the season before, my contract's up. You two have already renegotiated because you were here before. Mine's up right before the start of the season. I'm going to ask for big money and a piece of the back end, and if you two back me up because we have favored nations, we'll all get it. So I'll be the patsy.
Before she made the case, Hamill warned her it could blow up in her face. She told him there was no way the show would risk losing Chrissy. The audience loved the character too much. Here is what nobody told her before she walked into that room. John Ritter had a clause in his own contract stating that he would be the highest paid person on Three's Company no matter what. Not the highest paid man, the highest paid person. Under those terms, there was no number ABC could have given Suzanne Summers that matched him, because the moment she matched him, his own contract would push him higher. Equal pay on that show was not expensive. It was impossible.
Silly. If we pay you $150,000, we've got to pay Joyce DeWitt. She's got a favored nations clause, $150,000. We have to pay John Ritter more. We'd have to pay him $200,000.
Ritter never discussed his salary in public. He acknowledged the clause and nothing else. And years later, friends said he could not understand why she had asked for something his paperwork already forbade. He believed she knew. There is a second problem with the number, and it is worth saying plainly. Ted Bergman, one of the men who produced the series, later said Ritter was making around $50,000 an episode at that point, not $150,000. Summers believed it was $150,000. So did Joyce DeWitt. Nobody outside the accounting department could prove it either way, and 45 years later, nobody has. What is not in dispute is what happened when she asked. The answer came back fast. ABC offered her $5,000 more an episode.
You want to renegotiate? She is supposed to get $35,000 an episode next season. I said, we'll up it $5,000.
$35,000 against the $150 she had asked for. The network's stated reason was a clause in the contracts called favored nations, which meant any raise she got would have to be matched across the cast. Then came the part that had nothing to do with clauses or numbers at all. Who did she think she was? John Ritter was the star of the show, and then a line she would repeat for the rest of her life.
So there was it was proprietary. I made you. It was proprietary.
Summers said one of the producers went to the ABC executives and told them, "She's a blonde. I trained her. I'll train another one." Like I was some sort of seal, is how she put it. Hold on to that sentence. 14 months later, they went out and did exactly what he said they would do, and the woman they found was 21 years old. They didn't fire her. They erased her, slowly instead. The producers, she would say years afterward, had reduced her to a minute.
So what they did do was force me to finish out the year, but diminish me to a minute.
Summers still owed the show a full season under her contract, so she kept coming to work. But the part she'd built over 4 years was hollowed out within weeks. The writers gave Chrissy a reason to be gone. Her mother had fallen ill back home, and Chrissy had to go and take care of her. That was the whole exit for one of the most popular characters on American television, delivered in a line of dialogue by somebody else. What was left of her was a tag at the end of the episode, Chrissy on the telephone checking in from her mother's house while the real story moved on without her.
In a way, there was. That character, that delicious character that I was doing, was killed off before she was finished. I never felt that I finished that character.
Behind the camera, it was colder than anything the audience saw. She was no longer allowed on the main soundstage with Ritter and DeWitt. Her few remaining scenes were shot separately, on a different set, on a different day, so she never crossed paths with the cast she'd spent 4 years beside. And her name stayed in the opening credits the entire time. Because her contract ran to the end of the season, Three's Company kept billing Suzanne Summers as a star of the show every single week, over the same footage, in the same order, while she sat on a separate stage recording telephone calls. Millions of people watched her name come up on screen and had no idea she had been shut out of the building. Part of what made it cut so deep was who was now on the other side of it. One of the show's producers, Michael Ross, had been a mentor to her, a man who'd taken time to teach her how comedy worked inside a format like this one.
And I learned my timing from him, and I was also mentored by one of the producers. His name was Mickey Ross, who took me under his wing from that very first day.
By the time the fight was over, that relationship was finished too. The person who'd helped shape her as a performer was now part of the machine pushing her out. Her own side offered little protection either. Her manager during those years, the celebrity power broker Jay Bernstein, was supposed to be the one steering her through a moment exactly like this. Summers later said he mishandled her career at the worst possible time, leaving her exposed when she needed representation most. She was fighting a network, a set of producers, and her own former mentor without the guidance that might have changed the outcome. Consider what that stage had cost her to reach in the first place. She grew up the third of 4 kids in a working-class Irish Catholic family outside San Francisco, and home wasn't safe.
But working at the brewery, a job that he didn't like, his dreams squelched. It was easy to drown his sorrows in booze, and very quickly became an alcoholic.
Her father drank every day, and when he drank, he turned mean, screaming at the kids, terrifying the whole house. Summers has said she spent countless nights as a child hiding in a locked closet with her mother and siblings, waiting for him to pass out. She was diagnosed with dyslexia young, struggled badly in school, and found the one place she felt capable was on a stage in the school theater program. Then her life got harder before it got any easier. She won a music scholarship to college and got pregnant 6 months in.
I had sex that summer for the first time, if you can call it that backseat thing we used to do, that was fun, and got pregnant.
She married the father and had her son at 19, and the marriage collapsed within 2 years. At 21, she was a single mother with no money, modeling in San Francisco just to keep the lights on. That's the woman who eventually walked into a Hollywood audition room in the early 1970s with almost nothing behind her but grit. She picked up small parts here and there for a few years. Then, in 1976, ABC was casting a new sitcom, its third attempt at the pilot after recasting the female leads twice already. The network's programming chief had caught Summers on The Tonight Show and thought she had something. She won the part of Chrissy Snow, the sweet, scatterbrained roommate at the center of Three's Company.
One of those many times that I was on The Tonight Show, Fred Silverman, who was then the president of ABC, they were looking for a girl on the show called Three's Company, and they had tried to, they didn't test well. He said, I got the girl, I see her on The Tonight Show with Carson all the time. And that's how I ended up on Three's Company.
The show exploded. By its second season, it had climbed to number 2 in the country. By the 1979 to 80 season, it was the number 1 comedy in America, and Summers had become one of the biggest reasons why. A former ABC executive who worked alongside the show later said Summers simply exploded into stardom, the kind of breakout that happens to maybe one performer a decade. She built something real with her co-star John Ritter during those years too. She'd later credit him as the person who taught her comedy, just from watching how he moved and timed a line.
And I had an incredible teacher, and his name was John Ritter, that I studied like a sponge. I've never seen anybody as good as John Ritter.
She, Ritter, and Joyce DeWitt became one of the most recognizable trios on American television. By 1980, the woman who once hid from her father in a locked closet had become one of the biggest stars in the country. That's exactly when they decided to take it away from her. That is the woman they put on a separate stage so she would not have to be looked at. She appeared in 17 of that season's 22 episodes, almost all of them as a voice on a telephone.
We started to do Suzanne in a separate set after and a telephone call. It was in order to incorporate into the shows. I guess that's the latter part of the 4th season.
By the time her contract ran out at the end of the season, it simply wasn't renewed. There was no final scene, no send-off, no goodbye episode for one of the most popular characters on television. She was there, and then she was gone. She sued for $2 million and was awarded $30,000, one episode's pay for the show she had helped carry to number 1. And then the producer made good on his word. 7 episodes into that 5th season, in an episode called Chrissy's Cousin, a new blonde walked into the apartment. Her name was Cindy Snow, and she was written as Chrissy's cousin from the farm. Sweet, pretty, and clumsy, so the audience would feel like nothing much had changed.
Being cast in the role of Cindy Snow on Three's Company, it was just one of the greatest things that could have happened to me. A week later, I had replaced Suzanne Summers.
The woman playing her was 21 years old. Jenny Lee Harrison had been a cheerleader for the Los Angeles Rams. She had one small television credit to her name, a bit part on Chips, and she was so certain she would not get the job that she almost skipped the interview. She got it after a single meeting. Look at how the character was built. Cindy was made close enough to Chrissy that scripts already written for Summers could be handed to Harrison with the names changed. That was the point. Not a new character, a spare part. The producer had said he could train another blonde, and the show went out and proved he meant it in a matter of weeks. It did not work. Audiences did not take to Cindy, and by the 6th season, the producers had swapped strategies entirely, bringing in Priscilla Barnes as Terry Alden, a nurse, deliberately smart, deliberately nothing like Chrissy Snow.
I auditioned. They said that they were vague about what the problems they were having with Suzanne. I auditioned the same scene that I'd read before, and a year and a half before, and they said, "Congratulations, we found Scarlett O'Hara." They hired me in that room.
Harrison was pushed to the side and gone within 2.5 seasons, with producers writing her off as too inexperienced. Barnes would later say those were the worst years of her life. The show had spent 1 season replacing Suzanne Summers with a copy, and the next season replacing the copy with her opposite. 3 actresses stood in that apartment inside of 2 years. Only one of them had ever made it the number 1 comedy in America. None of it added up. A show at the top of the ratings had just gutted one of the biggest stars on television, and the real reason went far beyond one salary dispute. Some of it was older than the money.
And we start taking pictures, and the photographer says, "Suzanne, why don't you get down here in front?" And Joyce right on Suzanne's other shoulder. And I'm realizing he keeps pushing me here, and John and Joyce got upset, and John and Joyce always thought that I knew in front, and I really didn't. And then when it came out, it was the biggest selling issue of Newsweek, I think, ever at that time.
ABC had not liked a Newsweek cover story built around Summers, and the network was still annoyed that she had taken outside work for CBS during a break between seasons, renting her own time out to a competitor. None of that had anything to do with what she was paid. It did mean she walked into that room without a friend in it. But none of that explains what they did next. So why would a hit show destroy one of its own biggest stars over a raise? Summers and Hamill came to believe the answer had almost nothing to do with her. Hamill said that soon after the fallout, he got a phone call from someone inside the industry, a man he never named in public.
This could all blow out of the water because he had gotten a call the night before from somebody at the head office in New York. He said, "You're not hearing this from me, but they're going to hang a nun in the marketplace, and it's going to be Suzanne."
The message was chilling. In his telling, Summers had been picked. According to Hamill, studio executives across television were watching their actresses start to demand real money that year, and they wanted one loud, unmistakable example of what happened to a woman who pushed too hard. Summers was to be that example. On its own, an anonymous phone call remembered years later doesn't prove much, and that has to be said plainly, but the timing is hard to ignore. Right around the same time, the two female leads of another top ABC comedy, Laverne and Shirley, were locked in their own bitter, public fights over money and control, the kind of star rebellion that made network executives nervous about where all of this was heading.
It was on the news. It was on the news almost every day about my contract negotiations and all the attention that brought.
Summers was the biggest woman on the biggest comedy on the network. If the studios wanted to send a message about what happened to actresses who asked for too much, there was no louder way to send it than through her. Here's a question worth sitting with. Knowing everything that came after, the isolation, the erasure, the total shutout, does this really look like one salary talk that went badly? Or does it look like a woman who got singled out to scare every other actress in town into staying quiet? Tell me what you think in the comments. Whatever the real reason was, the punishment didn't end when the show did. It walked out the studio gates with her, and it stayed for years. Years later, in 2018, Summers summed up the aftermath in a single, flat sentence.
I went from being the number one actress on television in those desired demographics to now I couldn't get an interview.
She couldn't get a job in television. She couldn't get an interview. She was considered trouble. That label clung to her through the first half of the 1980s. Producers who had never met her already had a verdict formed. Shut out of network television, she went where the work still was, headlining live shows in Las Vegas to keep money coming in. Her husband, Alan Hamill, gave up his own performing career to manage hers full-time, taking on the job of rebuilding something the industry had tried to end. The freeze finally cracked in 1985 when she landed a role in the miniseries Hollywood Wives, her first real return to major television. But a full comeback took far longer. It wasn't until 1991, a decade after Three's Company pushed her out, that she headlined another hit sitcom, Step by Step, opposite Patrick Duffy.
When they said Patrick Duffy, I said, yeah, but is he funny? You know, I mean, I've only seen him on Dallas. Can he do comedy? And they said, well, he's really funny on The Tonight Show, and he was really funny in The Office. So I thought, well, if they're that convinced.
That show ran for 7 seasons and put her back on top. Proof that the audience had never stopped wanting her, even when the networks did. And the show she had been made an example of went on without her, for a while. Viewership dropped the season she left, then steadied. Ritter carried it. Three's Company stayed in the top 10 through 1983 and went into syndication in 1982, 2 years before it finished on the network, which is the moment the reruns started printing money for everyone who owned a piece of it. She owned none of it. Then it came apart anyway. In 1983, NBC put the A-Team on opposite it, and by the 8th season, Three's Company had fallen out of the top 30 entirely. It ended in 1984 after 174 episodes. ABC turned it into a spin-off built around Ritter alone, called Three's a Crowd, and that show finished 38th in the ratings and was canceled after a single season. Summers, reportedly, asked to come back for it. She wanted to play Chrissy Snow again, opposite Ritter, in the show that grew out of the one she had been pushed off. She was turned down. 4 years after they decided she was replaceable, the whole thing was over, and everyone in that apartment was out of a job. The personal wounds took even longer to close than the professional ones. Joyce DeWitt, the castmate she'd shared an apartment set with for 4 years, stopped speaking to her for close to 3 decades. The two didn't reconnect until 2012, when Summers invited her onto a web series, and the years of silence finally broke.
It's time. Wow, it's been over 30 years since Joyce and I have seen each other, so I have to admit I'm a little nervous. But let's do it. Joyce, come on out. Oh my God. Holy Kowski. Oh my God. Hi, honey. Hi.
John Ritter, the man she credited with teaching her comedy, stayed distant for most of the 80s and 90s. Summers said their friendship only began to heal in 1995 at a Broadway opening, and that Ritter reached out to her again warmly in 2003. A few months after that, in September of 2003, he died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition.
To report to you on the sudden and unexpected death last night of television actor John Ritter at the age of 54.
She'd gotten her friend back with almost no time left to spare. By the time she'd rebuilt her career and repaired what she could of those friendships, more than 20 years had passed since one salary negotiation cost her the biggest show in America. The lesson Summers took from losing Three's Company was simple, and it changed the rest of her life. Never again would she build something huge for someone else and walk away owning none of it. In 1990, 9 years after the show cut her loose, she put her name and her face behind a small, spring-loaded exercise gadget called the Thigh Master. On paper, it was easy to dismiss, a former sitcom star selling a piece of workout equipment on late-night television. Plenty of people did dismiss it. Then the numbers came in.
But how much do you think the Thigh Master alone has put into your pocket over the last, 30 years?
1995 times 10 million, so kind of do the math, and we're probably at 15 million now.
The Thigh Master sold more than 10 million units in its first 2 years alone. Over its lifetime, Summers said the product brought in close to $300 million. And this time, she owned it. She and Hamill held a real stake in the product itself, the exact thing the network had denied her when she asked for a piece of the show she helped build. The share of the profits she'd been punished for even requesting in 1980, she went out and built for herself, on her own terms, with her own product. That instinct became her entire second act.
I have had a second turn. Rarely do people in my business get a second turn. And I decided that if I got a second turn, I was going to make the most of it, and that never again would I only do one thing.
She turned herself into a one-woman business empire, books, health and wellness products, a brand that outlasted almost everyone who'd been in the room the day she was pushed off her show. She wrote more than 24 books, several of them bestsellers, including one about her childhood that hit #1 on the New York Times list. The woman the industry tried to make an example of ended up wealthier and more independent than the show ever could have made her. She was the ditzy blonde from a sitcom, easy to wave off, easy to paint as greedy, and for a long time, that was the whole verdict. So she kept telling it anyway. She sat for a long, detailed interview with the Television Academy in 2009, walking through the whole thing on the record. In 2018, she said flat out that she'd been considered trouble and frozen out. In 2020, she laid out the equal pay fight in plain terms, the raise, the back end, the response that she should know her place. Each time, the account got sharper, until the culture finally caught up to her, and people started hearing the story the way she'd been trying to tell it all along. She died in October of 2023, one day before her 77th birthday.
Suzanne Summers, the star of Three's Company, died Sunday after her valiant battle with breast cancer, just one day before her 77th birthday.
And here's what makes her story land as more than a grievance. After everything, the erasure, the shutout, the friendships it cost her, she refused to end on bitterness. In one of her final interviews, she said she would forever, ever be grateful to Three's Company. The show that moved her off its own soundstage was still, in her mind, the thing that gave her everything that came after. She had lost the fight over 10%, so she went out and took 100% of something else, and spent the back half of her life making sure no one could take it from her the way they did in 1980. So what do you think really happened to Suzanne Somers? A woman who overplayed her hand, or a warning the industry made out of anyone who dared ask to be paid like the men beside her? Let me know in the comments. And if her story meant something to you, subscribe, because we tell one of these every week, the real ones, about the people you grew up watching.